Welcome to our Red Hat Government Symposium Executive Insight Series. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here with Eamon McCormick, Director Go-to-Market for North American Public Sector at Red Hat. Eamon, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Wyatt. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me start by kind of setting the stage a little. Where have you seen examples of how the federal government is really putting data to work and fueling digital transformation?
So, as you know, our government symposium this year is really going to have an underlying theme of data. We think it's that critical, and we've obviously seen moves from both the federal government and state and local in that direction as well. They're making decisions to stand up chief data officers over entire competencies, individual agencies, and they're really getting focused on the importance of data. So we've seen that commitment from the government. We ourselves are making that commitment in terms of our product direction. In terms of where we're seeing it, I mean, there's a limitless number of use cases we could talk about. So if you think about things like tracking and taking advantage of weather data, of flight tracking and optimizing, flight routes that are happening across the country, anything that has to do with our space programs from NASA and from the Space Force, access to satellites, positioning of satellites, all of those are relying on data, in a lot of cases, data science to really optimize consumption of those resources. Things like fraud detection in a lot of the civilian agencies that they're leveraging, financial market analysis and projection, government oversight, health research, and even to the point of patient care. We've got some good examples coming up in Symposium where we're actually moving the processing of the data and execution of data science models closer to the patient to actually do some predictive analytics to determine what are some additional health challenges that a patient who's in the hospital at that point in time could face. We've got a great example coming up from the state of North Carolina, which I can talk about in a little bit. But yeah, there's a limitless number of use cases that rely on data, and it's data that's managed in the cloud, it's managed in the data center, but more increasingly, it's actually moving out to the edge and taking advantage of processing data at the edge to make real-time decisions.
Well, appreciate your kind of listing all those different illustrations. Next, let me ask, how has open source technology in particular played an important, if not increasing, role in the way the federal government is facing critical challenges these days, like the COVID-19 response?
So I think I'll use one of the examples that we're going to highlight during Symposium to really talk about this. So the state of North Carolina had to react very quickly to bringing employees back to work. They wanted to stand up a system very quickly to begin tracking which of their employees had actually received vaccinations and the details behind the vaccinations. And they really wanted to track the human workflows that involved, some human and actually some automated workflows. So if you think about open source, most of the data-focused technologies have come out of open source communities, things like Spark and Apache Kafka and TensorFlow and PyTorch. A lot of the technologies that are used to aggregate, stream the data, create the models, and execute the models and manage the underlying data are coming out of open source communities. So first of all, open source is creating the foundation for actually managing the data. And if you couple that with cloud architectures, it really makes the ability to deliver a mission-focused solution into the field very quickly. So the example that we use in North Carolina, it really took them in the terms of single digits of weeks to actually stand up and deploy a production capability to begin tracking those vaccination statuses of their employees who are returning to work. So because of the accessibility of cloud, they were able to spin up the compute infrastructure. They built everything on Kubernetes, which is really one of the leading open source platform projects right now. So they built everything on OpenShift on Kubernetes. They're leveraging open source business rules and business automation technology. They're leveraging open source integration technology. And they literally went from concept to production in roughly a month, give or take a little bit. And if you think back to the days prior to open source, proprietary technology, hardware based, I mean, a project like that would have taken years to really scope and procure everything that was needed and do the installations. And now we can actually deliver a mission focused capability in a matter of weeks.
That's impressive. And maybe in a related vein, how does open source also enable better cybersecurity for agencies?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's one that I think people have wrestled with when it comes to open source in the past, but it's been proven to be, the technology that comes out of open source is proven to be more secure. And it's really about the number of eyes on the code, and then the diversity of the community actually participating, contributing code, and then actually reviewing it, right? So you're not just getting one perspective from one geographic location and maybe one culture. You're getting a diversity of people from around the world with different companies, different private organizations, educational institutions, and individuals as well. And they're all contributing to the code. They're all reviewing the code. So as an output, the code itself is more secure. And then from there, it's all about the model that an agency would take to adopt that open source technology, right? So we advise, obviously, as Red Hat, it's our core business. We advise supported open source is the best way to consume it within a customer organization, because you've got an SLA, you have a support function, you've got SLAs in terms of security. If there is a vulnerability, we'll own the risk for that, and we'll make sure it gets resolved very quickly. And that's what the cloud providers are doing as well. They're building on top of open source technology, and they're managing some of that risk for the customer. So it really, the development process delivers a very secure foundation. And then the consumption model, I think, adds a level of security even above and beyond that. So it's kind of a short answer to the question, but I really think that's the foundational argument.
And that certainly makes sense. And then lastly, Eamon, what trends or technologies should federal agencies be paying attention to in the coming year or two, particularly as the open source movement continues to gain momentum?
So, I mean, there's probably a bunch we could list off, and I'm not an expert on technology trends. I know what we see and what's important to our customers. So I'll focus in on one area here. What's become really relevant for our customers, and that is an edge capability. So, we've kind of seen that market evolve over the last couple of years, and we've reached a point now where we're starting to see some workloads move into production. So you've got the maturity of 5G networks and the increase of bandwidth at the edge, the available bandwidth to actually, really transact and gather data. So more and more, we see our customers wanting to actually operate on that data for real-time decision support in the field. So, again, there's a whole bunch of use cases. We already talked through some of those, but what we're focused on is delivering a consistent experience from the cloud to the data center to the near edge, and then all the way out to the far edge. We want to create a very common operating model and platform for our customers to write software, deploy it, test it, eventually promote it into production, and run it on whatever architecture happens to be right. So again, all the way from the cloud or the data center out to the edge, we want to have flexible architectures, but a very common set of usage patterns. And again, we see all of our customers, whether it's military actually pushing decision support all the way into the field of combat, operating out of a Humvee, for example, and ingesting data and making real-time tactical decisions there. We talked about the presence in a hospital, for example, but there's a whole bunch of other applications as well, like predictive maintenance on vehicles and equipment, smarter cities, like actually pushing technology out into communities to improve the interaction that citizens have with technology in their community. So we really see edge being at the forefront of that, and edge combined with data obviously is incredibly important.
Absolutely. Well, Eamon McCormack, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share your insights and perspectives on the evolution of open source and how it's helping federal agencies deliver services better.
Fantastic, Wyatt. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.